Hi everyone, this session is on poetry. We are going to discuss the types of poetry, the forms of poetry, some major figures of speech, etc. And we are also going to read a few interesting poems. So let's go ahead. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is poetry? Here is a definition. Poetry is a genre of literature, a type of literature that uses figures of speech such as simile, metaphor, etc., imagery, and sound. It is designed to appeal to emotion and imagination. To the right side of the slide, you can see a poem written about a swan in the shape of a swan. Isn't that interesting? Here are some words that come to your mind when you hear the word poetry. The first one is emotional. Poetry should evoke some kind of emotion in us. It should be creative. It can be deep, although sometimes poetry can be shallow as well. For example, think about jingles, rhymes, etc. It can be beautiful. It can have a calming effect on you. Sometimes it can be fun. It is often quite personal. Poetry should be reflective. It should be honest. It can bring you joy. Sometimes it can also bring you sorrow. Sometimes it can provoke anger in you. Reading poetry is a kind of therapy. Poetry can have a therapeutic effect on you. Poetry can be abstract. Poetry can be intimate, can be quite personal. This is imaginative, can be soulful. Poetry can be musical, it can be rhythmic. So these are all words that come to your mind when you hear the word poetry. Now let's talk about a poem's form and structure. A group of lines in a poem is known as stanza. A group of lines in prose is known as a paragraph. Similarly, a group of lines in a poem is called a stanza. Lines make up the stanza. Let's talk about the history of poetry. The word poetry comes from the Greek word poiesis. Poiesis means making or creating. Poetry was originally composed and shared orally, and it was often set to music. Early poetry was musical in nature. Poetry has some commonalities with folk tales. If you look at folk narrative poems, they were stories that were meant to be sung. Beowulf is the first known recorded English poem. Not all poems have to rhyme, but some poems do have a rhyme scheme. Now, if you look at this poem, Introduction to the Songs of Innocence by William Blake, look at the first stanza. Wild rhymes with child, and glee rhymes with me. Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee. On a cloud I saw a child, and he laughing said to me. So wild rhymes with child, and glee rhymes with me. So the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B. Right, now look at the second stanza. Pipe a song about a lamb, so I piped with merry cheer. Piper, pipe that song again, so I piped, he wept to hear. So here, lamb doesn't rhyme with anything. Cheer rhymes with here. Again doesn't rhyme with anything. So the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, B. Lamb doesn't rhyme with anything. Cheer rhymes with here. Again doesn't rhyme with anything. The rhyme scheme is A, B, C, B. So a single poem can have different rhyme schemes in different stanzas. Again, not all poems need to have a rhyme scheme. So, rhythm is different from rhyme. Rhythm is the beat or musicality of a poem. Rhythm is what gives poetry a musical quality. Rhythm makes poetry pleasing to the ear. That is why it's soothing to listen to poetry. Now, not all poems need to have rhythm. These are lines from Keats' Ode to a Nightingale. Look at the lines. My heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk. Now the meter used in this poem is iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter is the most commonly used meter in English. It gives a rhythmic quality to the poem, like da-dum, 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 da-dum. How is poetry different from prose? Poetry is written in verse with line breaks, stanzas, rhythm, and sometimes rhyme. Whereas prose is written in ordinary language. There are no line breaks. Prose contains long sentences. It has to follow grammatical conventions of sentences and paragraphs. Whereas poetry doesn't have to follow grammatical conventions. Now, who is a poet? A poet is obviously a person who writes poems. He expresses thoughts, emotions, and ideas creatively through verse. He uses literary devices like rhyme, rhythm, imagery, and symbolism. A poet observes the world deeply, is primarily an observer, and then he puts these observations into words. Poetry aims to evoke emotion, provoke thought, or it tells you a story. So in this slide, you can see three famous poets. The first one is William Shakespeare, world famous poet and dramatist. The second one is William Wordsworth. And the third one is T.S. Eliot. These are three famous poets. Let's talk about the history of poetry. The word poetry comes from the Greek word poiesis. Poiesis means making or creating. Poetry was originally composed and shared orally, and it was often set to music. Early poetry was musical in nature. Poetry has some commonalities with folk tales. If you look at folk narrative poems, they were stories that were meant to be sung. Beowulf is the first known recorded English poem. Now let's talk about the different kinds of poetry. The first one is narrative poetry. As the name suggests, narrative poetry is poetry that tells you a story. It has characters, it has a plot, and it has a setting. Now there are two main kinds of narrative poems. The first one is an epic, the second one is a ballad. An epic is a long heroic poem detailing the adventures of a legendary figure. For example, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They are considered literary epics. The epic has a large scale setting and it has larger than life characters. It often has gods and godlike characters and there are wars involved. The second kind of narrative poetry is a ballad. A ballad is a song-like poem. It tells you a story. It often has a repeated refrain like a song, and sometimes it has rhyming lines. Now let's look at an example of a literary ballad, Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This is a poem that tells a story. It tells the story of a mariner who killed an albatross. An albatross is a seabird. So this man killed an albatross, and as a result of that he is cursed. And he is stuck in ocean without any food and water. Now let's take a look at these lines. Day after day we stuck. No breath, no motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boats did shrink. Water, water everywhere, not any drop to drink. Now, the second kind of poetry is lyric poetry. A lyric poetry is somewhat similar to a song. It has a musical quality to it. It expresses personal emotions or thoughts, often in a musical style. There are different kinds of lyric poetry. First one is an ode. An ode is a formal poem, a ceremonious poem that is addressed to a person, object, or event. For example, Ode to a Nightingale is a poem that is addressed to a nightingale. Or Ode to a West Wind is a poem that is addressed to the wind. The second kind of lyric poetry is elegy. Elegy is a mournful poem, a poem lamenting the death of somebody or the loss of somebody. And the sonnet is a 14-line poem with a very specific rhyme scheme. There are Shakespearean sonnets and Petrarchan sonnets. A haiku is a very short poem. It's a traditional Japanese form with 3 lines. It's usually about nature. Now, a ghazal can also be considered a form of poetry. It's a form of lyric poetry. It's a form of poetry originating from Arabic literature. It's kind of like a song expressing pain of loss or love. And these are all different kinds of lyric poetry. Now, there is also dramatic poetry. Dramatic poetry is written in verse, but it is meant to be spoken or acted aloud. It tells you a story or it portrays a situation. Dramatic poetry can be written in the form of dramatic monologues, and soliloquies. Now, now let's look at the different kinds of dramatic poetry. First one is soliloquy. That's a character speaks their thoughts aloud, often in a play, facing the audience. The character is now speaking directly to the audience. He's expressing his or her inner thoughts and feelings to the audience rather than to the other characters. There is also dramatic monologue. That's a long speech by one character addressing another character or the audience. Then there is also verse drama. That is a full drama or play written in verse form, written in the form of poetry. The next kind of poetry is descriptive poetry. It focuses on describing something. It focuses on painting a picture or describing a scene, an object, or a moment in detail. For example, nature poetry. Poetry of Wordsworth, for instance, where he describes a beautiful scenery in detail. It describes landscapes, seasons, or natural elements. There is also imagist poetry that uses precise imagery and clear, sharp language in order to paint a picture in your mind. Now let's look at an example of a literary ballad, Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This is a poem that tells a story. It tells the story of a mariner who killed an albatross. An albatross is a seabird. So this man killed an albatross, and as a result of that, he is cursed. And he is stuck in ocean without any food and water. Now let's take a look at these lines. Day after day, we stuck. No breath, no motion. As idle as this is that image.